So, Mom, did you have best friends growing up?
Oh, yes. I had Mary Lou. My very best friend was, can't even think of her name.
Did she go to grad?
Ann. She went to grade school with me. Those two went to grade school.
Are they still?
I still talk to Ann. Lost track of Mary Lou. But then in high school, I had some very good friends. And we had reunions forever.
Do you still get together?
Had our last one. The fellow whose home we always had it in died, and so. But the last time we had a picture taken, a group picture, everyone said, hurry, I can't stand here much longer. You know, everybody was decrepit.
Did you ever argue with your friends, or was it a pretty congenial?
No, very, very congenial.
Were you ever teased as a child?
Not negatively, no.
Your family seemed very soft-spoken. And
Yeah.
What kind of household chores did you have to do besides caring for the?
We all kind of did our own bedroom, and we lived out on the screen porch, not intended for a bedroom. So in the winter, there were glass windows, but very, very cold. So we just get a water bottle or a rock and wrap it in newspaper and run for it, you know.
You'd heat the rock in
the rock, and then on Saturday when you had to clean your room, you could just stay out there a few minutes. Then you'd have to come in and get warm, and then you could go out for another few minutes. But
did you share a bed with?
Yeah,
sisters?
2 or 3.
It's better than a rock.
Yeah. But I was disappointed that I couldn't do it, but the house was in disarray. And I thought, it's Saturday. Could not Mother say everybody assigned some jobs? And no, that didn't happen. It was very frustrating.
So lots of confusion. And Now, I know you had 2 mothers, and you probably don't remember Lula's food. Would you say they were good cooks?
Well, I think Lula was probably a better cook. That's just more her interests. And then I do recall, as Relief Society president, how much food the girls resented taking to different people. So I imagine she cooked.
She would bake a cake for someone? Or,
yeah.
And
quite a bit.
They had tri-pies.
Tri-cakes.
Tri-cakes.
Because you didn't have a set recipe, so you didn't know whether this needed 2 tablespoons of baking powder or 1. And so you would make put in a few handfuls of sugar and a few handfuls of flour, and then you'd bake that cake. And of course the kids always loved it because they got to taste that cake, and then you'd alter the recipe to whatever you thought was needed.
And Clara's interests were, food was to live, not...
That's right. No, food. She had not much appetite, and so food wasn't that important.
She did make a fabulous carrot cake.
She did.
And when did she... Do you remember that growing up, or was that...
That was later when she had more time. Yeah.
So...
And Dad would help with the meals and the breakfasts. And he'd sit on Sunday afternoon with a big bowl in between his legs and carrots, and he'd make us a huge big carrot salad for every Sunday night. Then he'd put warm honey water on it for the dressing. That was pretty good. Or in the morning he would make apples. Our neighbor had an apple orchard, and it was just assumed that we should have all the apples we want to eat. I'm sure that was the case. But he would fry apples in bacon grease. It was very good.
That would be tasty.
Yeah, it was good. Or fried mush that had been left over, and then you'd put it in a little squares and fry it in bacon grease. Everything was fried in bacon grease. Very tasty.
So he was aware of everyone's needs.
Yes, he was. He was. And he tried to help.
Did you take a lunch to school? Or?
Took a lunch to school. The kids that didn't have any money got a free lunch. But
you didn't have any money, but you didn't get a free lunch.
Didn't have any money, but I didn't get a free lunch.
So you had a little pride there in the family.
I think so. I think so.
Did you have any pets growing up or farm animals?
No, just a cat. And that didn't last very long.
So you've never been big on pets?
No.
What did you do for fun? Were there treats besides?
Oh, yeah. If I did beg Dad long enough on a Sunday afternoon for a nickel, I could get a huge, big Milky Way. And that was a fun treat.
Now, I remember you saying that you could trade eggs for a candy bar.
Yes, in Emory, yeah, I would ask Mother if I could go to the store. She said, yes, go get an egg from the nest, and I could go to the store. And it was a treacherous trip to the store in my mind, though, because there were lots of cows among the sagebrush on the way to the store, and I knew the threat of a bull, but I couldn't distinguish between a cow and a bull. So I had to treat them all like bulls, and I would hop from one bush to another.
Did you go alone, or did you?
I'd be alone. Guess the others were in school, and Kay was too young.
What about candy making?
Oh, yes, they used to make candy. Taffy. I remember more taffy than...
Pulled taffy?
Pulled taffy. Yeah.
So what did you do for fun? What were the games?
Oh, night games were just... And this is in Salt Lake. And all the neighbors get together and do night games. Andy I Over, Run Sheepy Run. That was just plain excitement.
How did you know when to go home?
Oh, I don't know. We would stop at 8 o'clock every night because on this old radio, Amos and Andy would come on. And we had to listen to Amos and Andy. And then we'd go back out and play some more.
Did you listen to the radio otherwise?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. There were programs for children after school that you could listen to. Can't remember the names of them. What did you? But
more entertaining than educational.
Just little.
What kind of books did you read?
I read Little Women and books like that.
Did you have any toys or games?
Oh, I had dolls, and I had a doll that I never could find again, and was hoping it would turn up. I'll give you the name of the doll in a minute, but it was a little newborn baby doll.
China face.
Mm-hmm. Cloth. Yeah. Esther's and like the older girls' dolls had leather bodies, leather arms and bodies and legs and jointed and hair. And they were very nice dolls. But all this you'd get through the catalog, and you got really quite an education through the catalog.
Reading the catalog.
Since you didn't travel, it was your tie with the outside world and what was going on. It was very valuable. Next to the Bible, I think it was the most valuable book we had.
Was the Book of Mormon read in your home?
No.
More the Bible?
Yeah. More emphasis on the Bible.
What about family prayer?
Oh, faithful family prayer, pulling our chairs out and kneeling at the table. Yeah, it was always.
Were you ever sick as a child that you remember?
Ruth tells me that I was very, very sick once with a fever that lasted for a long time. That's the only.
So you didn't have a lot of formal traditional medical care
No.
and not a lot of need.
No. And Mother would make a batch of 12 jars of some salve with different ingredients in. And it didn't matter what the problem was, you just got the salve and put it on.
Cure all.
I don't remember much of aspirins or hot packs and cold packs and salve. Yeah, should about do anything that you had, according to.
So you never broke bones or?
No.
Were you a good athlete?
Plaster.
Mustard plaster?
Yes, I was a good athlete, and I got to run for my class at Liberty Park on Fun Day or whatever it's called.
So you won some awards for
running.
running and anything else?
No, that's all we did was run. Didn't do many other games.
Did you have any favorite stories or poems or readings?
No.
And what did you want to be when you grew up?
There was not much time in our home to give anybody any direction. We just kind of swam with the flow. Dad was so harried trying to raise all these children on such a limited budget. And that wasn't Mother Clara. With her own children, didn't imbue them with many ideas.
So they were just trying to get by.
Just trying to get by.
You
through that
mentioned
depression.
you mentioned that sometimes you'd get a nickel for a large candy bar. Do you remember how much other things cost? Like clothes?
Yes, you'd go to the store. If your mother wanted a loaf of bread, which she usually made, but you'd say, well, do you want a 5-cent loaf or a 10-cent loaf? And you'd get a nice big 5-cent loaf and a very long loaf.
Was it white bread?
Wonder bread. Oh, Wonder bread.
So did they make white bread or whole wheat bread, your mother's?
Whole wheat.
Do you remember gasoline or stamps or movies?
Well, a malt would be 10 cents, and gasoline, like 19 cents. Movies weren't much money.
Do you remember going to the movies?
Yeah. We would have a movie at the ward, I guess just to save money for people, every Friday night. And they would have a part of the movie that was continued. You just get to a certain point, and then it would be continued.
So you'd go the next week.
So you'd go the next week.
Did you have dances or?
Yeah, we did have some more dances.
And what about school dances in Salt Lake? Did you go on a lot of dates?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I made all the dances. And they were fun. Basketball games and football games.
Were you a good dancer?
Probably a pretty good dancer. Jitterbug. And a jitterbug dance. Yeah.
And what would you do on dates? Did you go to movies or?
Movies, or sometimes we'd go to Lagoon or Salt Air. That was always a good time.
Are there any boyfriends that you recall particularly?
Well, my first boyfriend was Wesley Lang, and that was in grade school, backing up to grade school, when I knew I was leaving my old school, going to be joined by others, 7th graders from all these other schools. Knew no one would speak to me, so I better be nice to my old friends. I wanted somebody to talk to. So that first day, it was such a frightening day, and a note came up the aisle, and it said, Wesley Lang in the back wants to know your name. He being the cutest boy in the school. So then I wasn't so insecure about my new year.
In junior high.
Uh-huh.
What was your junior high school?
Lincoln.
And do you remember your grade school?
Lincoln Junior High. I cannot remember.
But you graduated from Granite High.
Uh-huh.
And how old were you when you learned to drive?
16.
So by then cars had improved?
Yes.
Were you allowed to take the family car?
Mm-hmm. If it was ever available. And I didn't take it very much.
I remember you telling me about a boy inviting you to a movie on a Sunday.
Oh, yes. Well, it was a crowd of kids that were coming down the street. I was out on our front porch, and they said, "Oh, we're going to the show. Come with us." So I said, "Well, wait a minute. I'll go ask my folks." So I went back where they were, and I said, "Could I go to the show with these friends?" And they said, "Mm-hmm. You can go. If you think it's the right thing to do on Sunday, you can go to that show." So then I thought, oh no, now I can't go to the show. Now I can't fuss and complain. There's nothing, the word is said. I can't go to the show.
They gave you nothing to resist against.
No.
It's pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. So who most influenced your thinking growing up, do you think?
Well, Dad and Mother Clara, a close second. She tried.
So they taught you from the Bible?
Yes, and mostly not scriptures, but just events and people and how things were handled and what was said, and that's where I learned
by
a lot.
Example. You mentioned the Bible was important in your home. Was it read aloud, or
no?
It was just a book that was available. So you got along with your parents quite well.
Oh yeah, I did. And Kay was a little less obedient, and I felt so responsible for him. So one day we were all going shopping in Salt Lake, and but Kay wasn't allowed to go because he hadn't been obedient. It spoiled my whole trip. I hardly could enjoy it. And one day we were riding home from Salt Lake, Kay and I in the back seat, and he looked out at the billboard and he said, "Oh man, I'll bet that's a good show." And it was, he thought it was Flapper Girl. It was actually Clabber Girl, baking powder.
Let's adjust real quick. Let's adjust the mic cord.
I'm going to make this easier for you, Grandma.
Okay. Thank you.
Ready? So you were telling us about moving away from home.
To go to California.
You were 18.
Uh-huh.
And did you go with someone, or?
I don't remember how I got down there. But I lived with Esther, with Gladys. I stayed some with Esther. She and Russell were there. But then I moved into the apartment with Gladys and Martina. And Gladys kind of had everything organized, and the rent due and the amount of rent each of us owed, and what food and I got a job in an insurance company, and we would go get our grocery shopping at a farmer's market downtown. None of us had a car. We took the streetcar down, and if one of us went, we could only spend 50 cents. That's all we could carry home. Because grapes were 2 for a nickel.
2 bunches for a nickel?
2 pounds for a nickel.
Wow.
And lettuce was 2 heads. 2 heads for a nickel. Nothing cost much over a nickel. So you figure it out. You get those bags. You couldn't spend and bring home more than 50 cents worth of groceries from these Japanese farmers.
So that must have been a fun time. Beautiful Southern California.
Yeah.
Your sisters.
Yes, it was. And the MN Gleaners, they were planning parties all the time. Something to do. Arrowhead. We'd go up there. I think we don't even recall there was a chaperone. But we'd go up and have our own. We'd go to Catalina.
So you went to the beach?
To the beach. Yeah, it was fun. You know, there was no option of staying home, but even so, I think this was better. Oh. Yeah, they used to call the
My
oldest
Mutual
ones.
or Miami and some.
Yeah.
Do you remember the ward you were in?
Oh, it was memorable. Wilshire Ward was the ward.
And that was the social hub.
Oh, yes, that was the social hub. Everyone went to Wilshire Ward.
And you worked at an insurance company. What?
The secretarial.
And was that what inspired you to buy a little insurance policy?
It might have been. I more just thought, well, let's see, I'm on my own, and I better get life, you know, so that I can be taken care of. So I would just buy this little insurance policy.
You probably had more money then than you
I
were
probably
used
did.
to. And did you? What kind of clothes did you wear? Was it mostly dresses or?
Yeah, mostly dresses. And Clinton's, what was it? Woody Clinton's food shop. Oh, it was a cafeteria. You could go by and they would put the food on. But you would go a cafeteria line and tell them what you want. So that was noteworthy. That was very different.
Did you go to any school after high school?
I didn't, except when I shouldn't have, when you kids were young, and I went to over a year at BYU just because I thought I really should have done that.
But going on to college was really not an option for you.
And for no reason, except that we were not imbued with the idea.
So
From
you had been a
mother or
good
dad.
student. Had you gotten any awards in school or?
No, but I was a good student. I took the college, you know, course. They had one for college. But had we just been given the least bit of encouragement, we could have done it.
You must have acquired secretarial skills in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So in your job at the insurance company, you did typing and shorthand. And
Yeah.
Were you good at those things?
Shorthand was, yeah, I was not the absolute best, but passable.
And do you remember friends from that era of your life?
Just the ward, you know. Weren't many other friends outside the ward. Everything was connected with the ward.
So did you make your own clothes at that point?
Oh, yes, I did. I look at pictures and guess somebody had a sewing machine and I made clothes.
There must have been a lot of swapping with all you girls.
Yeah.
And you were all loyal to each other.
Yes. Yeah.
So you mentioned meeting Dad at some sort of
Well, a beach party when I was down visiting at 16, and I just knew who he was because he and Max were such a pair. But I didn't meet him at that time. And then when I went back later, and it was, I was in he tells me, I was in a Sunday school class, and I made some contribution, and I did have the cutest dress, light blue wool, and a dropped navy grosgrain skirt. Was very cute dress. And he asked me out that afternoon, but I already had a date with someone, and that was good. but it was bad because it was Pearl Harbor afternoon. Oh.
The day he asked you out was Pearl Harbor?
So by the time we got home, we heard about this, but then the full impact didn't really hit. We saw what everyone was how they were going to react, and what they were going to do.
So we will go back to that. But growing up, do you remember holidays?
Holidays with the family were not always celebrated. Sometimes Mother, Clara, and Dad would take us to Bimini baths. Mother was a good swimmer and a diver. And we'd go up, that's in North Salt Lake, Sulphur Springs, and we did a few things like that.
But as far as Easter and Thanksgiving and Christmas?
Not a big deal.
Did you get Christmas presents?
Yes, we did somehow. Got some Christmas presents. The only one I regretted was I'd waited for so long for these black patent leather Mary Janes, and there they were. But when I went to put them on, they were both for the same foot. So I had to get that resolved.
Did you decorate graves on Memorial Day?
Oh, yes, that was very big. And conferences. Oh, that's where we would go. We'd go to every conference session.
At the Tabernacle?
But we'd sit outside mostly because Mother and Dad wanted to see their old missionary companions. Kind of a gathering place.
Do you remember the prophet when you were young?
Yes, yes.
Who was the prophet? Wilford Woodruff?
No.
Lorenzo? John Taylor?
No. Up just a little
Heber
closer.
J. Grant?
Heber J. Grant. Heber J. Grant was the prophet.
And he had a long beard? And
Yeah. Lots of interesting
But he was revered?
stories. He was. He was.
Do you remember your bishops or anything?
Some, not as much. Heber J. Grant made an ultimatum that anyone who was not keeping the word of wisdom to step down from their job and let it be filled by someone who was. That kind of shook the church up.
Because it had loosely
It had been quite lax, the word of wisdom.
What about the 4th of July? Was that a...
Oh, yeah, that was big, and especially in Emory. Oh, Emory with the rodeos. And yeah, I'd go down to visit Aunt Laverne in the summer, and she'd make me a dress, ruffles over the shoulder, a fourth dress, they called it. Everyone had a new fourth dress. And make ice cream from the... chip it off that ice block and make ice cream and have rodeos, and it's very fun.
What about Halloween?
Well, Halloween at that time was just to be really mischievous by the older kids. The little kids were just left with not much to do.
So it wasn't so fun.
But the older kids just went out and did destructive things.
Did you have turkeys on Thanksgiving?
Yeah, we would.
And as far as Christmas, did you talk about the birth of Christ, or was it mostly Santa Claus?
It was a lot of it was Santa Claus. The training we got was very subtle. Very subtle.
Your religious
But it was
training.
there. It was there.
Now, what about your birthday? Was it celebrated?
Yes, always had a party.
With friends or family? Oh.
With friends. Not a very fancy party, but a party.
Besides your Mary Janes, do you remember any other special gifts when you were growing up?
Just this Bilo doll. A Bilo doll. It's like a newborn baby doll. And I just wished I could have hung on to that. I looked for it.
Were there other traditions that were big in your home?
Well, the big tradition, I think, in everyone's home was spring house cleaning. And what a thought. You take everything out of the room. Maybe not all the rooms at once, but you take everything out of a room. And because there's so much soot in this valley from the coal and wood burning, you had to have a clump of a substance that would erase the soot from the wallpaper. Each piece of wallpaper had to be gone over, and the rugs washed, and bedding, and things put back, and drawers, and it was always, have you got your whole house cleaning done yet? When are you going to do your house cleaning?
So you wouldn't have considered skipping that ritual?
No, you wouldn't.
And what about wash days?
Well, in Emory, those wash tubs that were propped up on rocks and build a fire under them in the weather that you could do that. And just these big punchers, and you'd punch the clothes that had the soap, and then you'd put them into the rinse water, and they used a bluing, little balls of bluing you'd put in a sack and rub up through the water, thinking it got the white clothes whiter.
Were they quite clean, as you recall?
I doubt they were. I doubt they were.
So in Salt Lake, did you have a wringer washer, or was it still?
We had a wringer washer.
So Grandma Andersen, even with her projects and laxness, she did the spring cleaning.
She did. Yeah.
And she was quite a genealogist always.
Oh, yes. That's where her heart was really in genealogy. And I think she did a good job with the first few children. Then I think she thought, I have these children. They're here on this record. And now I'm going to go do what I want to do. Kind of left them.
And that would have been temple work and health lectures.
Genealogical and photography. Yeah.
So, Mom, do you remember your first date or how old you were when you started dating?
I don't remember my first date, really. It was probably with a group,
Do you remember your first kiss?
And I don't remember my first kiss.
So, you met Dad at the Wilshire Ward. And you were saying he asked you out, and you were busy. And then when did the first date really occur?
And then a little later, he asked me out, and we would go to the firesides where he and Max would put on the shows where Max would put his hands around Scott. No, Scott would put his arms around Max and make gestures according to whatever Max was saying.
So they were quite...
Oh, yes.
Captivating?
They were. And Max was there before Scott. And Scott thought, Max is not going to like me. But instead, he was smart enough to adopt him as a buddy, and they were better as a twosome.
So didn't they kind of start the firesides in the church?
They said that, after President Roosevelt had his firesides, that they kind of called their group get-togethers firesides.
So now when we go to 3 hours of church and they announce that there's a fireside, we can thank Dad and Max?
That's right.
Only they're not funny anymore?
That's right. That's
so
right.
Were there principles taught at these, or was it mostly entertainment?
Oh, yes. No. They had high-powered leaders that would be down there speaking at conference or something, and they would ask them over.
So they would entertain, but also they sound wonderful.
They were. They were.
And would you have refreshments? So tell us a little bit about the courtship. What kind of dates you went on?
Oh, mostly church things that we'd go on with church kids. And
so Dad was
trips
fairly
and-
recently returned from his mission.
hadn't really found himself. It's kind of a loose ends, I think. I was all of 19, Erica. A little young.
So how long did you date before you were?
Well, with his impulsiveness, he would talk about a ring, you know, and I wouldn't really commit. And I knew I was going to accept someday, but I was going to make it a more appropriate time.
So he would have gotten engaged
Yeah,
right off the bat.
he would have.
And
would.
do you remember getting the ring? And
Oh, yes. We left a fireside one night, and he said, I've got to go over to my sister Jessie's for just a minute. So we drove along, and he stopped in front of this house. And I said, well, is this where Jessie lives? And he says, no. And then he brought the ring out. And then I thought, it's too early. I cannot accept this ring. It was beautiful. And I tried to have him keep it longer, but he was so hurt. Just go for it.
So you accepted it that night?
Uh-huh.
Oh.
So I accepted it.
And it was quite a brief courtship and engagement.
Uh-huh.
So his family was in Southern California.
Mhm.
So you met the Whitakers.
Yes, yeah.
And we've always
We had some good dinners over there.
Grandma and Grandpa Whitaker.
And with the other siblings.
So they were so different from the Andersen family.
Yeah.
Was it refreshing in a way that
Well, it was kind of interesting in a way for me, because they were a little more theatrical than our family had been, so it was kind of interesting.
So tell us about the wedding.
Oh, this exciting wedding, and you at that time had to be ordered to be married in Utah. You had to stay in Utah 3 weeks to get your blood work done. So my friends, Gladys, we all would be married in Las Vegas and then go right over to St. George. So I was married on May 8th in
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas, and May 9th at St. George. And Ruth and Jean and the folks came down, and Uncle Harold officiated, and that was nice.
What about your wedding dress?
And Esther had made my wedding dress, but it was too practical, you know.
Not enough frills.
No, it was one that I could have worn in the temple afterwards. I don't recommend that.
So you would have had a little more
Yeah.
show.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about the ring. Where
Well, he brought the stone from Africa when he was on his mission there, and then had it set.
and it was in a platinum setting.
Mm-hmm.
So was there a party during this wartime wedding, or
Not much of a party.
no gifts?
No, a few gifts.
So you just
But-
had to start with whatever the two of
Mhm.
you could
Mm-hmm.
muster. And did
And
you have
we-
a honeymoon?
We went to the parks after St. George. Went to the parks, and that was fun. Horseback riding. I slipped off. The saddle wasn't on secure. Scott thought he'd lost his bride already as I slid down the dirt.
So I've heard about some tennis matches where you beat him.
Oh, yeah.
Was that before you were married or after?
A little of both. He wasn't too anxious to play me when I was going to beat him.
Where had
So-
you just learned to play tennis
Yeah, Gladys, that's what we did in California. We played a lot of tennis. Yeah.
So he was athletic, but you beat him.
I'd no doubt played more than he had.
Was marriage a rough adjustment, or?
You know, I think there were things that both of us were not prepared for. But generally, you know, you're so much in love that it carries you
Where did you live?
through. And we lived down on the beach, Manhattan Beach, and that was during the wartime. So we couldn't have any light showing through our windows. There was a captain that went around, and we'd have to block out our window lights because we all knew that there were submarines of Japanese right out there that might be lobbing.
And where were you working, both of you?
We both worked at Lockheed Aircraft because
So your lives were really in upheaval because of this war.
yes, and he would have been drafted had he not enlisted. And if he were to enlist, he would have his choice, and that's why he chose the film unit division.
So he enlisted shortly after. And
A few months after.
what were there rations on food and?
Yes, there were gasoline rations, but we didn't have a car, so the gasoline didn't bother us much. We'd just take the streetcar. And that's where on the streetcar one morning, this southern...
But was this in D.C. that you're going to tell about?
Shwe.
Did you know how to cook when you got married?
Oh, I knew how to cook some. Yeah.
Did Dad cook at all, or
No.
that was your job?
Yeah, that was my job.
Are there any stories that stand out about that time with?
Probably if I could have recalled them.
He continued to entertain at the ward, and would he do his caricatures at that time?
Yes, he did.
And that was always a...
Yeah. And the ward in Washington, D.C., anyone like Jack didn't know where we were, but he knew he'd find us at this ward on Sunday. So we did. We met up with Jack when he enlisted.
So communication with your family?
Only mail.
Only letters?
No, phones, because it was too prohibitive expense. It was too prohibitive.
So you all kept in touch?
By mail. A lot of letter writing.
And you never dreamed that we would have email and cell phone?
Oh, a cell phone from wherever you are? Oh, no.
So, in looking back, what are some of the hardships of things that you didn't have then that you have now, besides the ability to communicate?
Well, I think washing machines are surely, dishwashers are nice.
And did you
items.
have a home in California?
Yes, we lived with Grandma and Grandpa for a while.
Grandma and Grandpa Whitaker? As newlyweds?
We had 2 children.
So, how soon after you were married did you go to D.C.?
Oh, about 5 or 6 months. Yeah.
How did you get there? Did you drive or did you?
We drove. No. Yeah. No, we didn't drive. We left our car, and Grandpa was to sell it for $50, I remember. But we didn't take our car back there. Just the train.
Was that hard to be so far away from home?
No, it was kind of exciting. we had wonderful friends back there in the ward.
Who
you
were
know.
some of your friends in D.C.?
I've got some pictures of them, and I can't remember their names as well.
The
but-
Grows and
Yeah, and Barbara and Ben Lewis, and I remember Mar, a name, but you know, there were always firesides. There were always, and they were wonderful in converting people. Cleon Skousen would give a fireside every Sunday night, with no notes, holding the people just captivated. So, and then we were quite close to town. You could take a streetcar to town, or the zoo. We could walk to the zoo and walk to church. So, it
did you
wasn't too
work in
bad.
D.C.?
I did for a while.
And the humidity and the heat?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yes, I don't know. We lived down in what they called Mormon Gulch. So many Mormons moved down in this little gulch neighborhood area. It was hot in the night. You'd just, or in the day, you'd wear a towel so you wouldn't feel the sweat trickling down your back.
Did you enjoy D.C. or
Yes, I did. Yeah.
did you wear deodorant or?
I don't even know that we did.
And so people didn't bathe as frequently as.
I think we did wear deodorant. I remember the people from England did not wear deodorant.
I think that's still an issue. So you were mentioning the streetcars and
Uh-huh.
conversion.
And Wendy was born there, and one time Max Fisher went overseas, and he left his car, so we had a car for a while, and that was very fun. So one afternoon we were going to go out for a ride. Took Wendy out for a ride, and I thought we'll just get 2 ice cream cones because she can just have a bite of mine. So I gave her a bite of my ice cream cone. I never saw it again. You could not pry that from her hands.
So was it frightening to have children in uncertain times like that? or-
Well, not really. You know, that was the thing to do.
And where did you have your babies in the hospital?
Navy Hospital.
Navy Hospital.
Yeah, I was supposed to stay there 8 days. Brought home Wendy, and she said, "Can this be that I remember this?" And she did at age a little over 2. But she remembers these sailors bringing me in on a stretcher, and she being in a high chair.
And you brought Bonnie home.
Uh-huh.
So tell us about your children.
Well, we were so enamored of these children, you know, just meant everything to us. And it was a while before the war was won, and this is a hard time in my life. But I was so grateful for Scott, for Wendy, for Bonnie, for the church. I had everything I wanted, yet I wake up one morning feeling totally different. I was like I was in a panic, but I didn't know what I was afraid of. I was horribly afraid, but I couldn't imagine what was wrong. Why did I feel this way? And I felt, and so naive, so very naive. I thought, this isn't anything that a doctor could, there's no physical complaint. I can't go to a doctor and find any help.
So would you say it was clinical depression or? panic disorder? Or?
Yeah, a little of both, I think.
And Dad was understanding?
Yes, but he didn't understand. No, I didn't understand.
So had Tom been born yet?
No, just Bonnie. Bonnie, it was probably postpartum depression. But I didn't know. I didn't ask anyone.
Did you share it with anyone besides
Not
Dad?
much.
So
No, I was embarrassed about it.
and that was in Washington.
That was in Washington. And then it got a little better, but I guess it's been my whole life I've been trying to still solve the feelings I had that day.
So in some ways you've had really good health as far as not having a lot of illness. But you've had these other issues to deal with. If you could wave a magic wand and not have had that, would you?
I knew at the time I was going through it that it was a wonderful schooling. I don't think I would have. I knew how I was changing.
So it forced you to...
But here I am, still at 85, and I have notes that I took when I did see a psychiatrist when I went to California, after we moved to California. And I had quite a few sessions with him. And the very notes, the things he told me then, are the things I'm still trying to master now. It's not
What were
easy.
they?
He said, I'm trying to be safe the wrong way. It's like you've got this tree and all these branches, and you want to solve all these things out here, whereas the solution is within. It's in the trunk.
Oh,
Wasn't that good advice?
very good advice.
Even at that time, that was such good advice.
And you still have those notes.
Uh-huh.
So this forced you, as problems do, to...
To look within more and to get help from other people.
And you-
Written or shared things.
So you've always loved the self-help genre.
I've had to. I'm only now getting to the point where I'm more selective. I'm wearing thin. The Secret was the last thing to completely captivate my mind, and still does.
And
My pregnancies were good, but with this, but then after this, I really kind of call it a nervous breakdown. I don't know what you'd really call it. But then after that, while I was pregnant, those hormones all functioned perfectly. I was great.
so it was a physical, chemical...
It was. It was.
No, she
Yeah.
felt well when she was pregnant. Oh, yeah. Did you get sick when you were pregnant?
Yeah, but not lengthy. Not a lengthy.
And what about the births?
Oh, well, no. Navy, I think they just put me in a room and let me scream till a baby came. Truly.
Alone.
I don't remember one person. Not one person. Until it was time to deliver the baby. Yeah, it was criminal.
So you lived in an apartment in D.C. and then when the war was over, and Dad worked in the film department for the Navy. And then when the war was over, you went back to California.
Went back to California.
And so Tom was born
In California.
just right after the war.
And Aunt Laverne came down to help when Tom was born. Nice of her.
Very nice. I do remember Bonnie was very small, and Dad used to say that she was so tiny they could have put her in a shoebox.
Yeah, yeah.
But he did say that you put her in a dresser drawer.
We did, because we knew we were going to be moving. So when she came home from the hospital, we had to just put her in a drawer.
And then, in spite of not feeling well, you went ahead and had Tom.
Yes.
And there was no secret in our home that boys were
Valued.
valued.
Well, you know, Scott thought for sure that Scott was going to be another girl. He was going to be prepared. He wasn't going to be disappointed. You know, so he had it all geared that this was to be another girl. And when his mother told him it was a boy, she had to tell him 3 times before he would accept that she wasn't kidding him, that it was a boy. so that sort of came through a little bit, didn't it, with both boys?
Just a tad. So Tom, I remember Dad saying he was obviously so thrilled to have Tom, but he said, "Here, I get this boy," and then he described how he looked.
Oh. I don't remember that.
Said he had bunny eyes and
Yeah.
red hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you by now had purchased a home
in Westchester. And we had Tom. I was carrying him as a baby, carrying him around. And the fellow was from the ward that was showing us the home. And he said, "I'll give you this home for that baby." And he truly meant it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was just a small little clapboard?
Yes, 3 bedrooms, front room, small kitchen. We did utilize the attic for storage, and there was a garage. But
So did you love having your own home?
yes, yes. And the one thing that was good is that the front room was shut off from the kitchen. It saved my sanity, because I've never been able to take too much clutter. But I always knew I could open the front room door and see everything in order. And in my mind, I knew there was one place in the house where there was order. If not,
Did you have wooden floors or carpets? Or
we bought new carpet for the floor, and we had new linoleum put in the kitchen. And Max Fisher's dad was a painter. He painted it for us. It was very nice.
So it was a fun little house.
Yeah, we bought it for $8,000 and sold it for $11,000.
That's a pretty
So,
percentage-wise. a
yeah,
pretty
that was
tidy
pretty good.
house. So Dad worked for the studios at that time?
He did. He did, and it was hard because in the studios, you go from one picture to another. When your picture's finished, then you go to another picture. So that was a very hard way to live. Not
And there was
knowing.
no such thing as medical insurance. You just paid
No.
as you went.
Mhm. Yeah.
But it wasn't such a huge...
No, it wasn't. It wasn't.
So did you have neighbors and friends that you...
Oh yes, in Westchester, a lot of good friends on the street. Yeah, and in the ward. You know, whenever you're out, well, wherever you are, the ward just becomes your family, and it's great.
So how did you and Dad solve problems coming from such different...
Oh, I was so introverted, and he was such an extrovert. It was not easy. It was not easy to always...
And you were such a pacifist.
Yes, it was. So, I couldn't win an argument. The best thing was just don't argue. Just don't say any more. Just let it.
silently drive him crazy?
Yeah, I think it did. I think it did bother him.
Did you have a lot to do with the Whitaker family those years?
Yeah, they had get-togethers and Christmas parties and all.
So, at what point did your challenges with your back?
That surfaced after we were living in. It was after the war that it started to bother me. And then it would bother me, but I could go to the chiropractor and it would be all right for a few weeks. You know, it wasn't until after this trip to China that things really wound downhill.
But your back has been a struggle.
It has.
As long as I've known you.
It has, but not to the extent that it was.
So you took the more natural route with your emotional issues and your back.
Did.
Lots of
Exercise, chiropractic.
drinks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Lots of
Vitamins.
rice yeast.
Yeah.
Is that brewer's yeast?
Brewer's yeast. Yeah. Yeah.